Well, Jai, and welcome to the Gator Gates podcast. We are happy to be back with you guys once again. This is week, I think, 19 or something like that. It's been...
Something.
Huh? No, don't go live on my page. Go live on the Kepta page. Yeah, exit and then go switch to the Kepta page. You know how to do that, right? Hold on. Kenny Basha, you could do it. You know how to do it. Switch to the Kepta page. All right, so sorry about that. Welcome to the Gator Gates podcast. My name is Tutibsaa. I'm one of your hosts, and
this is Kagzrimen and Kepta,
and we
co-hosts.
And we are here with
Tiasta.
And before we get started, we would just like to acknowledge the forces in the non-material, specifically Nabnabala Musa Moradinabig, the great ancestor that started the Earth Center, opened up the doors back into the traditions for a lot of people, opened up the doors back into the Kemetic ways for the world in the modern age. And all the other great ancestors that are standing behind this great work, and all the powers of nature, all the deities that are standing behind the Earth Center, all the deities that are standing behind this great work, all the powers of nature, everything we'd like to acknowledge, all of those forces in the non-material. And, we're switching it up today. We're going to switch it up from now on. We're going to do things a little bit different, and we're going to hop right into our topic. Unfortunately, we had a guest lined up today, but due to technical difficulties and scheduling restraints, we weren't able to have the guest on the show today. But we're still going to bring you a great show. And, we wanted to touch on something today, particularly relevance, right? There's a lot of people out there that are irrelevant. And the thing is this, is that relevancy is a matter of understanding how to stay current, how to keep up with the times. There's a lot of people out there that are frankly just kind of old, or kind of like, not really keeping up. They don't really know how to, remain dynamic. And
I don't think being old
being
is
old
controllable.
Yeah, but old is not an indication of your lack of ability to be dynamic. That's just your inability to, keep up with the times. But particularly, the interesting thing is when you look at the modern civilization, and when you look at the West, right? The West in particular, if you aren't able to keep up with the youth, you're out of touch. And then you're kind of like considered a fossil in a lot of ways. It's a young man's game. The youth run the West. It's that simple. Everyone wants to remain young. Everyone wants to try and stay young. It's about finding the fountain of youth. It's about injecting your face with as many weird chemicals as you can to look like a blown up lizard or the saw puppet. And then you have to somehow remain like the mom from Mean Girls. You have to do all this weird stuff in order to somehow remain relevant. Whereas that in Merita and in indigenous societies, the elders are the ones that you have to keep up with. And they're the ones that really set the pace and set the current in terms of what you have to keep up with day-to-day life in terms of how you remain relevant. But everything is kind of backwards. So, we really wanted to kind of open up the conversation today and really start talking about how there's just a weird insistence on focusing on the fact that everyone wants to remain relevant somehow, some way. And the way that everyone thinks that they have to remain relevant in this day and age in the West is you got to keep up with the kids, and you got to keep up with the youngins. Because the other day I was somewhere and there were these teenagers that were getting off of their soccer practice or whatever, and I was listening to them, and because I was like a table away from them, and I was listening to them and kind of like just kind of observing their dynamics and the way they were kind of moving and the way they were kind of doing things. And then I just kind of realized, I was saying to myself, I'm like, I'm finding it difficult to keep up with these teenagers. And then I'm saying to myself, I'm like, wow, because I'm in my 30s. And I'm saying to myself, I'm like, if I'm not careful, I'm going to become kind of like out of touch with what the youth are kind of keeping up with. Because I mean, you know, being in your 30s, you're not, you know, too old, you're not up there, but you can still be considered out of touch with the times because you're not keeping up with, like, I'm too old for TikTok, I missed the train on Snapchat, like, I'm just, there's just like certain things that I'm just like, I'm too old for Cash App. Like, I'm just like, there's certain things like you have to evolve past, like certain things that you gotta, you know, let go of. But here,
just passing you by.
huh?
They're just passing you by.
Yeah, just passing you by. But the thing is I was looking at those kids and I was saying to myself, I was like, I need to spend more time around, like, the youth, because I need to be able to keep up with what's happening in the West. And if I don't keep up with the youth, then I'm going to find myself out of touch with reality, or the reality that is, you know, so-called reality here in the West. But then I was kind of thinking about it, and I'm like, but, you know, the interesting thing is that if we were back home in Merita, it would be the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't give two shits about what the kids have to say.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be taking them into consideration. Not to say you don't care about kids and what they have to say, but you would know that, like, okay, my experience puts me in a position where I don't have to defer to kids, or I'm not looking to take things off of the youth in order to stay relevant. So, you know, just putting a few things out there to kind of, you know, start the conversation off and jump right into our topic. But what do you guys think?
I mean, it's an interesting topic because, like, we as a temple, as New Jersey temple, happen to have a lot of what we would call youth. We have,
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, you people in their 20s.
yep, 20s,
Or
30s.
early 20s, 30s.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas,
People with a pulse.
yeah, like, you know, we're even we're starting this podcast because we know we have to be on that pulse. We have to reach the youth. We have to, like, have that voice. And we've been hearing, even Gay to Gates has been like young people like it. They're like, this is, you know, more my speed. This is more like, I can get behind this. I can watch this. I can listen, you know, and it's like, this is how people are getting their information nowadays. This is how people are getting their sound bites, you know, how they're getting their, you know, whatever they're watching nowadays is through these kind of mediums. And, you know, so we're trying to put our finger on the pulse, but, like, we're also representing a very,
pulse.
we are on the pulse. But we're representing a very large tradition of elders and temples back home in Merita.
Yeah.
Right? And, like, you know, I was thinking about this, like all of these episodes that we're doing, that we're building, and we're, like, you know, trying to, you know, throw out some controversial topics and, like, building on the knowledge and building. This is even building up to, like, when we actually get the elders on the show, like, the bombs that they're going to drop are going to be enormous, beyond what we have dropped so far.
I mean, and that's if they can find their way to the podcast. Just kidding.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting.
You awake yet?
I think it's an interesting topic because, traditionally, you would mostly find that young kids or the youth would really spend a lot of time with, like, their grandparents or, like, the elders of a society. And that's even because when you are an elder or you're an older person or you're somebody who's closer to, maybe death, as we would say, being around the youth is actually what keeps you alive. That's what keeps that pulse going. So sometimes I find that here in the West, we have this kind of stigma against, hey, this person is too old. Oh, you old, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But then the old people also have this stigma. It's like, oh, these young people, they're crazy.
Right.
I don't really want to be around them. I don't want to see their madness. But there has to be some kind of balance that we have to find, because that balance is what really brings the life, because
Yeah.
us as the youth, right? Even with this podcast, us starting this podcast or doing what we're doing, as you said, putting the pulse on things is what would even get the elders to even come and be able to activate certain
Right,
things.
exactly.
But it takes like that energetic essence or that youth for it to activate. And I think it's also interesting in the West when we see culture or pop culture or just like the trendy stuff, because something Tutibsaa said was interesting, that the fact that the youth are what kind of like rule in the West. I think I have a different perspective, because who's really in charge of these medias? Who's really in charge of?
You mean like the
Yeah, like on
the
powers that be.
machinations, like
yeah, the powers that
machines,
be.
Yeah.
I think what we're even talking about is the fact that the powers that be understand this very well. They understand the power of the youth themselves. So they themselves are actually the ones utilizing that energy and pushing the youth into certain directions, because they know that's where society will follow, because society is ultimately going to follow where the energy really goes.
But then now we got to distinguish between elders and olders.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we can say the powers that be within this society are controlling things or puppeting things, but they're really not standing on much, right? They're not standing on any actual culture, principles, tradition. So when you're not,
Well, maybe they are, but they don't want society too.
well, that we could
So
get
they
into a
don't
whole
want-
new conversation.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of depends, because it's like, okay, like everybody knows that guy that like you grew up with, and he's like 20 years older than you. Because I was thinking about this, right? And I remember when I was in middle school, I'll never forget this for some reason. I was thinking about this the other day. And there was this dude, and he was in high school, and we were in middle school. And there were these 3 girls that were friends with this guy from high school. And like he was like dating, like he was kind of like cycling through the 3 girls, and he was from high school. And like he was a couple years older than us, so he had a car and he could drive. And I just remember saying to myself, I'm like, damn.
And you guys didn't?
Huh?
You guys didn't?
We were in middle school, bro. Like we didn't have cars yet. So it's like,
Could have stole your dad's car.
yeah, could have, but I didn't have a license. So I was not.
Your
I
dad
was-
would have.
Yeah, my dad. You haven't met my dad, but my dad at that time, no. Now my dad has softened up a lot, but my dad at that time, no. But anyway, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, man, like, cause when you're young, you look at people that are a few years older than you as like kind of having it all figured out.
Sure.
And then you slowly realize like that dude was actually a fucking loser.
Right.
Because he couldn't get any girls his age.
Yeah.
So he was coming and then getting the girls like a couple years younger than him. And then everyone was like, oh, that dude's so cool. Or the girls were like, oh yeah, that guy's awesome. And it's because he couldn't get any bitches his age. But then you're looking at him as a younger person, and
Yeah.
you're being like, nah, like I wish I was kind of like a little bit older, because I would have things figured out. Or when you're a teenager or a kid, you look at your parents or you look at everybody as having everything figured out. And then you come to realize that a lot of times the people that you think are older, that have a lot of wisdom or kind of have it all figured out, they were just figuring it out as they went along.
Sure.
And then you just come to realize, like, you know what, maybe these people don't have it figured out the way that you think they have it figured out.
Yeah, but if we're gonna get, yeah, so I mean, this brings a good point in terms of the idea of like relevance, right? Because if you can look at,
Irrelevancy.
you can look at that like high school kid and be like, damn, like he was it. He had everything. He was the man.
His name, you guys want to know his name?
What?
Seth.
So if you guys looked at him like he
course.
had
I know, right?
everything,
Of course.
right?
His name was
But
Seth.
like this is what's happening in our society now. Like you go on TikTok and it's like these like girls in crop tops doing like
It's
weird
insane.
dances,
Yeah,
and
it's
they're
insane.
no, but they're actually making millions of dollars
Yeah, I mean,
on like endorsements and stuff.
yeah. The-
But that's what is like culturally quote unquote relevant right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're saying is like you could be like now you have to be a complete youthful degenerate in order to be considered popular. or in
Yeah.
order to be like relevant. And
Okay.
that's the thing, is relevancy in this day and age is based on you being a degenerate and being youthful, being sexualized,
Sure.
and becoming like a brand. That's why like the those, what's the name of those dumb girls?
There's a lot of
No,
dumb
they're
girls.
like, no, they're sisters. Charlie
Oh,
D'Amelio,
D'Amelio or something.
D'Amelio, some shit like that.
Charlie
And then-
D'Amelio.
I don't know who that is.
Exactly. You're not supposed to know who they are, but they're highly relevant in terms of like they're like huge TikTok stars, and they do like, the girl can't dance. It's like a white girl that can't dance. The worst dances ever. She be doing the wackest fucking dance, just like that little stupid like. And it's like that's what they do, and then she's considered like super popular and making like millions of dollars, and then you're just kind of sitting here like, why is this rewarded? Like, why is there a premium being set upon degeneracy and youthful degeneracy? Because that's the way you're considered relevant.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's just how they want the society to go. Because if you have a society that's full of degenerates, in a society where no one actually values anything, because when we even talk about relevance, it's like when you were mentioning how you're like 30 years old, right? And then you didn't keep up with like those.
my age.
You said it. I didn't say it. But you know, you're trying to keep up with these things. The problem becomes
Well, you have
that,
to.
Yeah, you have to. But the
Right.
problem becomes this: you in your life and in your journey and your growth, you don't really find these things relevant because they're not relevant to your survival per se.
Of course.
But now the thing is, things have been flipped because this is how society is making money, and this is how society is even pushing their agendas. So it has to be relevant in everyone's lives. And what better way than to get the youth to be the ones to attach themselves to it?
Right.
Because even for the future, those same youth, they're gonna find these things irrelevant at some point.
some point, yeah.
But now they're gonna have to push something else. And something else, and something
So
else.
the youth will
and
find
then
something else to
Right.
push. Yeah.
That's why you see like every generation, I think it's like every 10 years or so, there's like a severe degeneracy within the population.
Yeah.
And it's just like what people value
Yeah.
is decreasing.
Yeah.
It's like family is not valued anymore. That's why you can have all these debates on whether abortion is right or not. That's why you can have all these debates whether if someone can change their sex, all these different things, because there's no value to certain things anymore.
You mean like
And
a sex change?
like sex changes, because people don't really value themselves. Like you can't really value yourself if you're saying that you don't feel like you should be who you're actually born as.
Well, yeah, it's a huge identity problem. I mean, because you have the youth, like nowadays, everything is kind of, it's interesting because everything that's pushed on the youth is pushed on the youth in a way to make you kind of, like, because I was looking at one of the kids the other day, right? And I was saying that the girl, she's talking like a cartoon. And I noticed, like, I'm not going to say the kids' names, but the oldest girl and the oldest boy, they, in the community, they talk like cartoons. And they communicate like cartoons. And then, like, they think they're on, like, a sitcom. Like, they're like,
Yeah.
"Grr, meh, meh, meh." And they're, like, doing all this, like, these dumb gestures and, like, talking in this way where they're like, "Well, I get a better, and then they just, like, talk in ways where they're, like,
You know, it's funny because in the West, that kind of behavior with children is normal.
Normal.
well, it's
Yeah, 'cause
normalized
it's what they
because
watch.
of what they watch.
Yep.
But then you go to Merita and you go to real places that are connected to reality, and then you see, like, the kids don't act like that. The kids are actually more stoic and reserved and kind of, like, weary of you than they are to kind of function in a way. Like, they just all kind of watch you like, you know, let me make sure that this person is, and they're obviously intelligently raised, and they're watching to make sure that you're not, you know, weird. And then they know that you're a foreigner, and they'll be like, Anisada, which means, like, foreigner. and they're calling you out because they're like, you know, this person that maybe should not be here or doesn't normally come around is around. So then the kids have an intelligence to them that here the kids don't have. And the difference is that the intelligence that the kids don't have here, it's kind of the way that they kind of get you to think that you have the intelligence is they make you think that you know better than the parents. And that's what the cartoons kind of manipulate you into thinking.
Because you notice with these cartoons, the parents are never around.
And the parents are fucking idiots.
And they're always idiots.
That's also about what's relevant to the parent. Because it's like whatever the parent finds relevant in the moment is what they're going to gravitate to. So here, what's relevant here is different than opposed to a place where what's relevant is more the immediate needs and the immediate survival. Here, what's relevant is more so our wants and what we just like, or the things that are just promoted to us, or basically the desires and being a consumer. That's what's relevant here, as opposed to a place where it's all about survival and what's necessary for the family.
Yeah, but going back to his point, to Tutibsaa's point about like how here we're literally socialized to go against our parents, to think that we do know better as the youth, that like kids do know better, because all these shows give that message all the time. It's all the storylines are about going against what your parents' wishes are, or like making your own path, or going on an adventure against what your parents said, right? And so then it becomes like almost this value system that gets set up for kids here of like not listening to your parents or devaluing your parents in favor of your own freedom or personal development. And then, you know, then you have kids who grow up and are like, F you, mom, like, do my own thing.
I'll never forget, I'm not going to say my friend's name, but he was white. And one day he was like, you know, something had happened. I don't really remember, but I think I was at his house. And then he was like, you know, he was like, I don't have to be such a bitch, mom. Damn. And I was just like,
Well, what did she do?
Nothing. She did nothing. She's like, what did you say? And then he's like, I didn't call you a bitch. I said, why you gotta be such a bitch? And that's the thing is like, you know, I don't think I would have lived to have seen the next day.
Nah, I would have got beat with a pen.
But the thing is for a lot of people that have lost culture, because it's really about the loss of culture. And that's the thing is like you have older people, because you can't really blame the kids. You can't blame the kids because you are growing up with parents that are doofuses. You are growing up with parents that are idiots.
Elders.
Like there's elders. There's a difference. Because an elder has some intelligence to them. They have some cultural experience. They have some culture. They have something that they're standing on. But a lot of the parents are irrelevant. Like they are useless. Because irrelevancy has more to do with an inability to keep up with the times. And therefore, your inability to keep up with the times has more to do with your ability to adapt, and more to do with your ability to survive, more to do with your inability to accurately assess your surroundings, accurately represent your surroundings. It has to do with survival. So you can't blame these kids for being like, yeah, we do know better than our parents, because our parents are buying into the system. And our parents are trying to instill us, or are trying to instill in us the lack of culture that they have. And then it's becoming about like, well, I have the authority because I'm older than you. And that's the problem, is like you can be around a bunch of people that have no real experience or have no real culture, and then they'll be like, well, I'm older than you, so you're supposed to listen to me. But then in Merita, being an elder is not based on your age. It's based on your knowledge, and it's based on what you're capable of doing. Because you can be younger than somebody, and you can have a upbringing that can allow you or give you the capability or the capacity to do something that that person that has the age and the experience cannot.
It's like even people there recognize what your spirit's coming with too.
Yeah.
They recognize, hey, this is a spirit coming back that's maybe like an elder coming back in a youthful body, right? And that can be seen, that's known sometimes ahead of time through divinations, and then it's like no matter what the age of the person is, they may be walking with wisdom in life. And they may be coming with a certain thing that actually demands a certain level of respect.
Yep.
But like here, if that kid may be born here in this society, it's just like that will be totally missed by the adults around the child. And then you don't even give the child the upbringing needed to manifest maybe the big destiny or the abilities that the child comes with.
Well, you can't give the child what you don't have.
Yeah,
Right. And that's the
sad part,
problem
yeah.
is like people don't have it.
Yeah.
And because you don't have it, then you can't give it to the children. So you can't instill in somebody something that you don't have in your possession.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a set of values instilled in you, you're not going to be able to give that to somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that there's a lot of people that think that because they're older than you, they might have a set of values that they actually don't possess. Because you could attempt to go learn a set of values, and your inability to actually learn that set of values and your misunderstanding and learning that set of values, you can then think that you have an understanding. And then depending upon who's around you or who's not around you, then you may not get the correction that's needed for you to understand that you don't understand it, but you think you understand it.
Sometimes it's not even about people looking for a set of values, because again, if the values themselves are not relevant in the minds of the people, then that then becomes an even bigger issue. It's just like you have elders who are not even looking for that. You have elders, like you said, who are just, or elders who are just there and wanting to be respected based upon the relevancy of their age. So that is like a huge problem in itself. And I know maybe in the West, I don't know, what would you say the solution could really be? Because there's a lot of elders or elders like that here.
Well, I mean, that's the problem, is like a lot of those people are just in the way, and a lot of them just need to be called what they are, and they're just blockages to advancement. They're blockages to progress. Because the thing is there was a podcast I was listening to, and I can't remember the guy, but he was like, regime changes either happen when the old guard dies off, or when there's like a high risk situation like war, or like some type of pandemic, some type of like incident that forces you to change and forces you to reflect. It's one or the other. And that's the only time you see cultural change or cultural revolution occur. And then I think the problem is that there's a lot of people that frankly they're irrelevant. Frankly, they have no real cultural values. Frankly, or they have a misunderstanding of cultural values. Frankly, they think they know better when they actually don't, because empirical evidence is what matters, which means you have to be able to put the proof in the pudding. So if you are doing something and it's not working, then there's a dishonesty to your approach.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to say, like, you know what, maybe I don't know better, because somebody younger than you might come along with a completely different approach.
Yeah.
Their level of consciousness in terms of the way that they approach the issue will be entirely different. And then they will have progress, or they will show an aptitude or a comprehension that you don't have. And then a lot of times where the impediment to progress comes is, well, why am I not the one that's able to do that? And then you should listen to me because I'm older than you. And then I'm just going to pull rank, and I'm going to make it about age as opposed to capacity or capability or ability or evidence, the empirical evidence of being able to do it, whereas that you haven't shown that ability to be able to do it.
I mean, yeah, I think that's the state of our society right now. I think we're literally in that predicament right now. And it's like, it manifests in terms of these generation wars, right? We have all these baby boomers who've been in these corporate positions for years and years, right? And they're like, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're like the dinosaurs at this point.
I
right?
mean, just say it with your chest. Yeah, they're
like
dinosaurs.
they're like the
and
dinosaurs at this
the
point.
comet needs to come.
And then you have Gen X, then you have the millennials, then
Dinosaurs
you
don't
have
exist. They
Gen
never
Z, right? And then
What's
you know,
after Gen Z?
I don't
You.
even know
Your
what's after Gen
generation?
Z.
No, I'm a millennial. Apparently,
I don't
if
even
that's
know.
what they want to label
I'm
me
a
as,
millennial.
Whatever.
But then, you know, the whole thing, all these articles started getting written about millennials and how lazy they are, how they don't want to work, they don't want to fit into corporate structures, they just want to do what they want to do. And yeah, maybe
That's propaganda.
maybe the youth
It is
are
propaganda.
coming in
Yeah,
and saying,
it is.
we're not going to fit into the system that you created. We're not going to do things the way that you set it up, because we can see how it's failing. We see how it's not working. We see how you work for years and years and years, and then you hit retirement age, and it's just like you go sit on the beach,
and you suffer
and you're right, and then you get ill, right?
and
you
just die.
right, like honestly, because it's like the
Miserable,
system
crying in
sets
your
you
bed
up.
alone.
The system sets you up to work your whole life, get ill,
want one?
and go to a retirement home.
So I don't want anybody to think we're sponsored by what we're about to bring on camera. So a word from our actual sponsor, because I didn't do that. So hot sauce, sorry to interrupt, began in 2007 when a small group of students traveling in West Africa were trying to think of ways to support charitable projects. One of the students traveling happened to be an artisanal hot sauce chef, and right there, I don't want pineapple, what you got? Okay, yeah, I'll do pineapple. Here, you can have that one. He doesn't want it. Give it to me. I'll bring it.
He
No,
just put it
no.
there. Just leave it. Just leave it.
And right there, sauce, hot sauce. I'm gonna need another one. This is like nothing. Sauce Hot Sauce was born. Since then, Sauce Hot Sauce has prided itself on making exceptional artisan hot sauces with high quality ingredients to support good causes. We continue to do this with the best and tastiest offering of sauce flavors to date, with a focus on supporting displaced families in the Fada and Gourma region of Burkina Faso with the revenue from our sales. Sauce Hot Sauce. Get you some. It's great. It's phenomenal. We are not sponsored by what we are drinking on camera, but that's okay. You can support us if you like. Alcohol or spirits, it's a very spiritual thing. Reach out to us, White Claw, if you'd like to support us. We'll put a sign up. Come on down. But yes, back to what you were saying, Tiasta, before we interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, it's become generational wars, and like, you know, that's the problem with a society that doesn't educate people properly, that doesn't have a rites of passage anymore to introduce you into adulthood properly. So then the youth never get educated, and then they grow up to be adults who don't have the foundational cultural or spiritual education, and then they become olders, right? We can't call them elders at that point if they never got educated. And then you have a group of youth coming after them who, you know, we have to give the credit to where credit's due, to the youth, to the energy, to the spiritual potency that youth brings, right? And the fire that youth brings. And then you have entire generations of youth coming up behind people that don't have an education, and then they're saying, okay, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't think we're supposed to do it this way. Society, the way that it's structured, is not making sense in the way that that it's going and moving.
The sad part about it is what you just described is the degeneracy of society, because even the youth who now can obviously see, I don't think that's how it's supposed to go. Again, because they didn't have that upbringing of like a cultural and spiritual education, they too are retarded. So then they have children, and then they just breed more retards.
It's retards
Right,
raising
and it's
then-
just retards raising retards.
Right, and then it's like no one has any cultural education, so who do you listen to in that case? It's like you can't listen to the youth, you can't listen to the elders. It's like the society completely goes off the track.
Well, you know, there's a few questions in the chat, so I just want to acknowledge the questions. But like, Matthew Ruta, shout out to Matthew
Matthew.
Ruta, So how does Kepta embrace change? Does Kemetic culture even embrace change? Like, could Master Naba be doing what he did be seen as becoming relevant? Or do we change by staying the same in a society that constantly changes? That's a great question.
Excellent question.
That's an excellent question, because the thing is that what Master Naba did was considered highly radical. And it was considered highly radical because what he did is he opened up the doors of a very cultured place that had maintained its culture and protected its culture for thousands of years in secret, hundreds of thousands of years in secret. And he opened it up to people that did not have that same, dare I say, preciousness, dare I say, care to culture. Because you know that Bible saying, thou shalt not cast pearls in front of swine? That's what uncultured people are. They're kind of like swine, because if you throw pearls in front of them, they won't know what to do with them. And it's not the best way to maybe talk about an uncultured person, but it's the easiest way for you to get the image. It might be a bit jarring, but it's the easiest way for you to get the image, for you to understand like what an uncultured person would look like in the eyes of somebody that is very cultured. Now, what Master Naba did was considered highly radical, because it's sort of like you go to the person that's kind of impeding and infringing and destroying your culture, and now you're opening it up to those people. And it doesn't have to do with a specific color of people's skin. It has to do with a specific way you approach the existence. And that would be an indication whether or not you're cultured or not. It's about your ability to cultivate something within you and bring it forth. But that comes from understanding that that has to do a lot with cultivating divine qualities. But if you don't have that ability to do that, or you don't have somebody to kind of set you on that path, then rightfully so, you're going to become somebody that's uncultured. So you have to, in order to stay relevant. This podcast is an example of being dynamic in a world in which you have to constantly adapt. Because there's a lot of people that wouldn't do a podcast coming from the Kemetic civilization, because it would be considered a dilution of the majesty and the profundity of everything that we have. Because we represent temples. We're just an extension of the temples. So we have places that we go back to, that we report to, that we're a part of, that we have to say that we're coming from. It's like if you're in a gang and you got to claim your set, we claim our set. And the way we claim our set is we know what temples we go back to and we report to. But then it becomes more about, do you want to become attached to the way in which you deliver something, or do you want someone to get the message? Because it becomes more about the message than the delivery, because the delivery is going to adapt depending upon the times. The way in which you present something, the way in which you need to give something away will always be dependent upon the times, will always be dependent upon the current predicament or the current, the contemporaries that you have to kind of take things off of. So it's important to be able to maintain your values, but express them in relevant contemporary ways in order for them to be palatable and digestible by those that do not have the same cultural background or cultural conditioning as you.
I would say it's almost like that saying, the more and more things change, the more and more things remain the same. So it's again, just to reinforce what Tutibsaa said, it's like, yes, there's cultural values, there's principles, there's things that we stand on, and there's things that we're just not gonna let go of. And those things are never changing, but the way we might express them to the world, or the way that you might see us express those things, will change. Because even with the concept of Kepta, right, it's having to do with the becoming. And the becoming or the existence is ever moving, it's ever changing. But it's changing and it goes in cycles, meaning things repeat. There's things that are just constant, and there's things that are ever changing. But the more they change, the more they remain the same. So it's just about that dynamism. It's just about finding ways to express what is never changing,
Yeah.
but it's also still changing and becoming.
Yeah, because it's such a good question because, like, of course, Kemetic people embrace change. Like, we know that we know, like Kagzrimen said, that the existence is made up of cycles. Nature follows cycles, ups, downs, seasonal changes, hot, cold, right? So everything changes over time. Now, what we're standing on as Kepta is also a very, very, very old mission. So it can confuse people because they can think, well, if you're bringing us back to ancient value systems or ancient knowledge or an old mission, doesn't that mean we have to somehow like transport ourselves back in time or stay stuck or stagnant in one place in order to like follow these value systems? And that's simply not the case, because the great Kemetic civilizations, even for them to reach the height that they did, for them to be so successful, they had to stand also on the principle of dynamism and change and understanding the cyclical principle. And so when we now are in Kepta, we are embracing now what our ancestors did, the principles our ancestors stood on, the knowledge and wisdom that our ancestors had. And we don't question that, because if it worked for our ancestors, it works for us, right? But we also know we are in an ever-changing world. We are in a different time period. We're in a contemporary time period. And even for us to say that we can somehow do things exactly the same way would be stupidity, right? Even to say that we can do things exactly the same way that they did things in the 1990s would be stupidity. If Master Naba was alive today, we know he would be dynamic with how he would be bringing his mission out there, with how he would be bringing his voice out there. But what he wouldn't be messing around with or changing is the principles he was standing on.
Well, that's the thing, is there's so many people out there that think that you can hide behind the words of a dead man, because it's always convenient to talk about how, well, this is how it was supposed to be done based on the views of a time that's passed from someone that's no longer around. Because that's the thing, is like, principles never die, but the expression of principles vary depending upon the times. So it's very easy for somebody to say, well, the expression of that principle does not look that way, so I'm not in support of the expression of the principle in that way. But it becomes a matter of convenience, because what it becomes about your inability to adapt with the times, and then your attachment and your own fear or mediocrity, and therefore you're like, well, that's not the way it's supposed to look, so I'm not in support of that, or I don't like that. So then it becomes more about the worry of image, because so many people are so attached to the way they're perceived and their image, and it becomes less about, well, I have to do what I have to do in order to survive and in order to adapt. Then the expression of my principles will vary depending upon what that looks like. So you're not going to be concerned with the image of the expression of your principles if the true concern is the survival of your principles, because you're not going to care the way it's perceived or the way it's looked at. And that's why you have a huge problem with people understanding that there's certain traditional values that will never die, because they're principles in and of themselves that stem from and come from the divine world. So it just becomes a matter of understanding that you have to evolve and you have to adapt in order to stay relevant. And if you don't, then you're just irrelevant and you're out of touch with the times, you're out of touch with reality, and that's why no one listens to you. So going to some of the other questions that Matt has posted in the chat, he said, what about the fine line between mentoring youth and grooming? Hashtag cancel culture. This is the problem, is it depends on what you're attempting to instill in the child. And a lot of times grooming becomes like grooming is kind of like a thing that kind of starts when it becomes about you attempting to maybe take away someone's ability to self-assess or move through the world or have their own ability to think for themselves. And that's where grooming kind of comes in. And it kind of like becomes like a weird culty thing, because what you do is you kind of like groom the person to kind of act according to your convenience. Because it's like, well, don't question adults. Or it's like, you always need to question adults unless it's me. Don't talk, don't be, like, always be honest, but don't be honest with me. And then that's where this kind of like grooming culture comes from. And that's where kind of like grooming starts, is that it becomes less about you kind of empowering the individual that you're raising and more about being able to instill in them what you want to be instilled while handicapping them to be able to continue to control them. And that's the difference between mentoring youth and grooming. Is grooming has more to do with you trying to instill something in somebody but making it stop, depending upon trying to instill the ability to think for themselves, but putting a barrier or a boundary as to where you cannot think for yourself, depending upon who they're questioning or what they're thinking about. So mentoring has more to do with you're instilling something in somebody, and then you have to understand that they might even turn around and use that kind of questioning even on you. And then that's not an attack on you. But grooming has more to do with you are taking something and instilling it in the person, but then stopping them from being able to question you or question somebody that you deem as being like, no, that's who you don't question.
The English language is so interesting because those two words, just neither of them sound negative, but if you can like understand like the meaning of the word and then like see how it's used practically, it can be negative. Like, why is English like this?
It is.
Grooming sounds negative. I mean, maybe that's just because it's what it's developed into, the word. But like grooming and mentoring, I mean, in my mind, it's just
Mentor.
two completely different things. I mean, and the difference really is culture, because you could think that you're mentoring someone, you could think that you're bringing them into a value system, but at the end of the day, you're maybe just indoctrinating them into believing what you believe.
It becomes indoctrination.
Right, or following your lead, right? Whereas someone who's a true elder, someone who's a true mentor is always going to lead you in the direction of cultural principles and higher growth for yourself within the society and the group or community as a whole. So they're always going to, it's always going to be functional for you. Anything that you learned through a mentor is always going to be functional for you, not only with the mentor themselves, but within the broader community, within the broader society. It's always going to serve you well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is going to, I mean, you know, we'll pivot and then we'll go to the next question, because now there's a question I really want to get to, but we got to work our way there. What do you do when one listens to you unless you have a credible status? This is the thing is...
You mean no one?
Yeah, I'm assuming that's what he meant, no one. Credibility has to do with there being a cohesion, which means that there has to be a consistency to your character. There has to be a consistency to your behavior. Like, you lose credibility when you say something and then you don't follow through. You lose credibility when you say, like, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and then you don't deliver. Or you say, like, okay, I'm going to be up at 5 a.m. Everybody be up at 5 a.m. And then you're the only person that's not up. You lose credibility. And that's the thing is, credibility has more to do with the ability to deliver and follow through. You lose credibility when you try and make yourself appear to be more than what you are. And that's why no one believes politicians because they have no real credibility, because they make all these promises and they say they're going to do this and they say they're going to do that, and then they say everything that they need to say in order to get you to vote for them, but then when they get in there, then they don't do anything. And then they understand that, okay, now that we're on the inside and we're a part of the club, now we're just going to totally throw everything that we said we were going to do to the side. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to know and be a part of the inside track, the inside club, and we're just going to do as everybody does on the inside, and then be like these lifetime long politicians where you say what you need to say, you know, you do your backdoor dealings, you do your business, you do whatever you need to do, you get your inside track on your stock market, you get your inside track on your business stuff, you get your inside track on how to avoid paying taxes, you get your inside track on that, how to molest children, how to groom children, how to do satanic sacrifices. You're like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're a part of. And then you just continue to do that. And then you just show up every 4 years or every 8 years, depending upon, what faction of the government that you are trying to get elected in. And then you just continue to hold that position in the government. But then on the outside, you then understand that now there's a discrepancy in terms of the way now you're living your life, and there's a disconnect in that gap between how you used to function when you had some real credibility and how now you function where you have no real credibility. That gap has widened and has gotten bigger and bigger. And that's the thing, is credibility has to do with more about your ability to deliver and hold to your word and hold to what you say you're going to do, and there has to be no disconnect between what you say, what you do, what you claim to stand on, and then what you do behind closed doors. Because nature will always expose those that claim to be standing on something or claim to be doing this or claim to be doing that, and then when push comes to shove, they don't deliver, they don't stand on it, and they don't hold themselves to it, and then they just don't actually be about it. It's about being about it. Credibility doesn't have to do with anything else aside from standing and delivering and being about it.
I think those politicians are credible. I mean, they have a credible track
All of
record of nonsense, so that's very credible.
They have a credibility in terms of dishonesty and bullshit.
That's credible. That's credible in their world. That's credible
in their
because
world.
They have their
it'll get
own
them
little,
elected.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, but I think we mistaken credibility for charm nowadays in politics. Like anyone can charm you. Anyone can be charming or have a personality or can have a good speaking voice, and now you can look at them as credible. And
It's really, again, going back to even relevance. It's about them knowing how to be relevant.
Yeah,
Right.
stay relevant. They just say what they need to say based
Exactly.
on the current problem. That's why all the companies come out and then they say like, oh, okay, we're in support of LGBTQ. But then the minute that Gay Pride Month is over, then they're like, on to the next one.
Yeah.
And then they show up in a dashiki for Black History Month. And then they show up in whatever they need to show up in because it's just about their bottom line and it's about the almighty dollar. That's it.
And even just on a deeper level, if we're talking about credibility, like if you're actually assessing someone's credibility, you want to learn from them, you want to gain knowledge from them, then you got to figure out where they got that knowledge from.
Yep.
Did they get that knowledge from a teacher? Did
Are you
that
making that shit up?
teacher have a teacher? Did that teacher, teacher, right? Is there a lineage there of knowledge that was passed down? Is there wisdom that was passed down that actually follows a certain line? Or is it just somewhere along the way someone like woke up in a cave and was like, I'm going to give this speech today. I'm going to say this piece of information like it's wisdom or like it's truth. Or does it actually come from a line of real knowledge and real truth?
Yeah, I mean, going to the next question is, to whom and how far is Kepta's mission trying to reach, and to what end? What is the Earth Center planning on doing to get the word out? Like what you see right now. Like, hey, you got to adapt with the times and you got to get the message out. And that's the thing, is really the basis behind Gate of Gates, which is often imitated but will never be duplicated because you don't have the sauce. And we got the sauce, we got the recipe right here.
The sass.
Is this. is it's about making what we do accessible, because you don't see the Freemasons advertising. You don't see the Rosicrucians advertising. You don't see secret societies out there advertising that they're a secret society. That's the whole basis of the secret society, is that it's based on keeping the secrets and the mystery. And we are the original secret society. We are the original mystery schools. And yet we have to do this in a way where now all these so-called secret societies, all these other so-called organizations have to know that daddy's home. And now that daddy's home, now all these other so-called secret societies and these organizations that claim to be standing on things have to take a seat and have to sit down. So we're going to take it where we need to take it, and we're going to take it where it needs to go. But stay tuned, and the only way to find out is you're either a part of it or you're not, and you can come and be a part of it, or you can sit back and you can watch it, but you'll see where it goes. But we'll just say, stay tuned. And that's what we'll say, because we're fighting a war of generations. We're fighting a war of ideas. We're not fighting a war of flesh and blood. There's a lot of people out here that are focusing on the physical, and for them, it's just about how do we fight the wars of the physical, but we're fighting a different kind of war. The things that we fight for and the things that we fight with are things that you cannot see and that can see you. So if you think you can overcome or you can stand against that in which has the ability to see you and you cannot see it, that in which has the ability to ride on the wind and you cannot catch the wind, then you are mistaken. So, hey, consider this like a kind of nice way of saying that you'll see where we take and what Kepta is really standing for and the mission of Kepta and to what end the mission is going. But the only way to really find out is to take this, sit down, write it down somewhere, log it, and to know at some point or another, if you're listening to this right now and you're not a part of it, or if you come across this at some point and you do listen to it, that you'll have to say like, hey, you know what? I remember that guy's face. I remember the face of Master Naba. And then you'll be able to be like, yeah, you know what? Yeah. Okay, I did hear that. Yeah, I did know that. So, just sit back, take notes, and then you'll see. This is the question I really wanted to get to. From Cam Warrior. What does your organization think about Africa obtaining a nuclear weapon? So, me and somebody else, we went and saw Oppenheimer last night. And it was obviously about the creation of the nuclear weapon. And let me just say that was quite possibly, that was the best movie I've seen in a long time. That was the first movie I've seen in maybe years that I could say that not only did I not want to pick up my phone and kind of like zone out at times because of how mindless and dumb filmmaking and the content of films have become. That was the first time I saw a movie where I was like, damn, I better not pick up my phone because I don't want to miss what's going to be said and what's going to happen because of how important every piece of dialogue and everything that happens on the screen is. And I would say this is, spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear, about the philosophical kind of like message behind the film, I suggest you turn this off or you walk away. Because here's the thing, is the whole basis behind why the scientists in the scientific community started having second thoughts about creating the nuclear bomb and the nuclear weapons and nuclear energy was, did we set humans and humanity upon a path of destruction in which they will never be able to come off? Because what will happen is one person will say, in order for there to be equality, I must have the weapon. In order for there to be equality, you must have the weapon. In order for there to be equality, all of us must have the weapon. And the scientists were saying, are we essentially creating a problem where what we're going to do is we're going to create a situation that will set humanity upon the destruction of humanity in totality. And I would say this, sometimes, yes, it's dangerous to have certain weapons, but if you have the responsibility and you have the ability to understand how to wield a weapon and how to handle a weapon, then hey, I'm all for it. If Africa needs a nuclear weapon to hold the other so-called superpowers accountable, because sometimes the only language in which somebody understands is the language in which they attempt to speak to you, which means if somebody tries to bully you, you need to let them know not to bully you. And sometimes the only way for a bully to understand not to bully you, you have to bully them back. Sometimes you got to speak to people in a language they understand. So if the superpowers need Africa to get a nuclear weapon, for them to be like, you know what, we need to stop playing with these Africans, then so be it. Then, yeah, we're all in support of, or at least I can say for myself, I'm all in support of Africa getting a nuclear weapon. Because if that's what Africa needs in order to hold the so-called superpowers to the fire and hold them to it in terms of keeping them and holding them accountable, then yeah, then come on down, get your nuclear weapon.
Here.
Go ahead.
I have a somewhat more measured view on this topic. I mean, maybe it's an idealistic viewpoint at this point, because it's like we're past the point in history, right? We're past the point in history with where that movie was depicting, in which the technology was made and unleashed, has already passed, right? But in my view, none of humanity should have this. None of humanity should be wielding this sort of crazy weaponry that can destroy entire cities and entire.
Yeah, but it's too late.
It's too late. That's why I'm saying this is an idealistic view.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, in an ideal world, all of these weapons would be completely destroyed, and we would go back to having a neutral field where no one would have access to this. I mean, if we were intelligent as beings, as human beings, being in tune with nature, like, no one should have this. This should not be accessible to people and a species with as much fallibility as we have.
My take on this is I wouldn't say it's that much different from what Tutibsaa said, because I've often actually thought about this, really. And thank you, Chem Warrior. Of course, it would be the guy with the name Warrior in his name. So personally, I think it would be a good thing. And here's why. I think that, like Tutibsaa said, to level the playing field, it's necessary. I also think that violence and destruction and chaos at some times is necessary.
They're very useful modes of communication.
Right. So with that necessity,
On a mass scale.
right. But with that necessity, I forgot who said this. It was one of these scientists, but he said he doesn't know what the third world war will be fought, like where it will be fought, like how it will be fought, but he's sure that the fourth world war will be fought with like stones and swords again. So I'm saying to say this, it's like, if we already see that there's a problem with having these weapons, maybe all that needs to happen is that sometimes a little destruction has to happen before things can regrow itself. Maybe these weapons need to be fired, and then maybe everybody will learn their lesson, and then we can start to, rebuild civilization again.
Yeah, that might be the only way that we learn our lesson, because just looking at the history of humanity and how we go, it's like things have to get really, really, really bad before we learn our lesson. And how much worse can it get in this society at this point, in the direction that we're headed?
Because it's already very bad.
It's already very bad in terms of just the level of illness and sickness and mental illness and AI and all the directions that we're headed in as a species.
Polluted rivers.
It's
Yeah.
over. I mean,
artificial meat.
artificial meat, like men aren't even men anymore, women aren't even women anymore.
Yeah, we're already
just
destroying
like,
ourselves, so you might as well
are.
just push the button.
Yeah.
It's already there.
I mean, I'm sure the
But
earth is
who
like,
gets
do
to
it.
push the button? Who gets to decide? I mean,
That's the other thing. What he just said, right? I didn't want to say it, but since he said it,
No.
my
Yeah,
take on
no,
this
if we
is
want to
that
take it there,
I
we
was
can.
gonna take it there.
right. There's some non-material entities at work
Yeah,
at play.
yeah.
Yeah, of
So
course.
the fact
Right.
that it even exists, that shows the earth itself, maybe.
Right.
The ancestors themselves, maybe. The gods themselves, maybe, already are planning and looking like, look, they're not getting it. So at some point, we're going to need to push the button.
Well, if we're going to go down the road of destruction and self-destruction, I mean, the earth plays a huge role with whether or not individuals or large groups of people go down certain roads of self-destruction or destruction.
Maybe that's what AI is. Maybe AI is the earth.
AI is the earth. I can't get behind that.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about?
Secretly. Maybe they think they're building artificial intelligence, but it's really a higher intelligence that they can't understand or comprehend that's actually using them
Okay, so
to
next
manifest in
question
the physical. I'm just saying. It's my theory.
In the traditional society, why can't adults be questioned? It's not that adults can't be questioned. Adults can be questioned. But there's the difference between questioning and then to question something. Because to question is about understanding the contents and the nuance surrounding something. And then whereas like questioning something is just being like, why? Why? And then like you can ask, like you can be trying to figure out the intelligent context surrounding something. Like if somebody tells you, like, this is a notion that a lot of people have a lot of difficulty understanding, and it's in Merita, when someone tells you to do something, you don't sit there and say, well, why not? You just do it. And then it doesn't speak to a lack of intelligence, but it speaks to an understanding that there's a context where it's beneficial for you to understand to not do that. And then in due time, that context may be revealed to you depending upon the way in which you apply that knowledge that has just been given to you, or that piece of information that's just been given to you. Like if somebody tells you not to blow on food, always the inclination is, well, why not? Why? But if you just sit there and you start to think about it, and then you're like, well, what would be the context behind not blowing on food? What would be the context behind not sweeping at night? What would be the context about not using soap past a certain hour? And then you start to say to yourself, like, you know what? Then you can maybe start yourself down the pathway to start asking the right questions by thinking about it, and then asking intelligent, informed, thoughtful questions surrounding the context to get answers that will set you upon being able to equip yourself with the knowledge to understand why you wouldn't do that thing. But people here have a tendency to want evidence before you do it. That's the whole basis of science, and that's why science is a very flawed field, is that it's about, you have to have evidence in order to support the argument, in order for the thing to exist, which means that once you get past the 3 dimensions, it's very difficult, because how do you prove it or not? If you don't have the ability to understand how time and space works, or have the ability to understand how something may communicate to you beyond the 3rd dimension, or how something that is beyond the 3rd dimension would communicate to something within the 3rd dimension. So it becomes a very difficult, a very nuanced thing to be able to navigate, that you have to be able to understand in order to get to a point where you're like, you know what? Okay, now I'm dealing with things that are actually intelligent, or a field of knowledge that's actually intelligent, whereas that a lot of times it's not.
Well, we get taught in our society just to question everything, and maybe because there are certain things that are off in our society, but the thing that you have to understand about real culture and real elders and real wisdom is that there's a difference between honest and dishonest questions in that context. And we bring up this topic a lot in the initiation, is like when you're actually asking a question, you have to analyze, like, is it coming from an honest place? Do I really want to ask this question because I have no level of knowledge, I have no ulterior motive? I just want to know the answer to this question to build whatever gaps I have in my own knowledge? Or are you actually asking the question because secretly you're saying, I don't believe you, or I don't want to believe you, or I don't want to do what you're telling me to do, or I don't like what you're telling me to do, and now I'm just going to question it for the sake of questioning it. And that's the difference, and that's the principle between asking questions and questioning within a cultural context.
And just kind of moving to the next question, because we do eventually need to get to rapid fire, because now we're doing rapid fire toward the end. But the question is, coincidence that other temples locations have a big push to have an online presence? Like I said, often imitated but never duplicated. If the modern colonial system got their knowledge from ancient Kemetic civilization, how did they obtain so much power? Because knowledge in the wrong hands is still very powerful. And that's what, okay, I'll say this without saying it, right? There's, just be quiet. So it's like, a lot of people talk about the emerald tablets, right? And this is the thing, is, you said what?
I said we're going there.
Just a little bit. A lot of people talk about the emerald tablets of Thoth, right? And then they don't understand that there's actually aspects that the priests were very intelligent in hiding to ensure that that would not fall into the wrong hands. So I'll say this. Everything you think you know and everything out there online that everyone claims to know about the emerald tablets is wrong.
Billy Carson.
You say who?
Billy Carson.
Yeah, no, that's a Fed. If you listen to anything Billy Carson says and anything that comes out of Billy Carson's mouth, I feel sorry for you, because that's a Fed.
The guy, I saw a clip of him today talking about Thought, the Atlantean king,
Oh, God.
who went off world to visit something about his father in the next star system, and they sent him back down to restart civilization after the flood.
Yeah.
I'm just like, bro,
Well, that's all there because
who
Well, 'cause-
really sits down and like think this is like
Yeah, but there's a
real?
lot of people, bro. There's a lot of people out there that think that Gaia TV and everything that they're saying about aliens, because this is the thing, right? Is like once the government came out and started talking about aliens,
Yeah.
like when have you ever trusted the government about anything that they say that they have and anything that they say is real? Like black people know this. White people maybe trust the government, but black people don't trust the government. Like we know that anytime the government starts saying like, yeah, this is what we need to start doing, we know that there's a problem. There's like something that we need to start looking at, right? So for the government to come out and be like, aliens are real, that shit is a lie. It's a lie and it's a distraction, because aliens don't exist in the form that they're making it seem like aliens exist. Aliens exist in a completely different form. So going back to the emerald tablets and what everybody thinks Billy Carson is saying is real and all that kind of stuff, all of that stuff is a distraction to keep you from actually obtaining real knowledge, because real knowledge comes with something that cannot be taken back. Once you have it, you cannot take it back. Once it's been given, you cannot retract it. And that's the problem, is the modern society took what they took, and they were very intelligent about maintaining it. There is so much things that Kemetic civilization is sitting on that we keep within our initiatic temples, that we keep hidden from the public, that if certain people actually still maintained it and had it, is the reason why you see people being able to hijack humanity the way that they are. Because there's so much missing from history. They've removed so much from the world. They've removed everything, because what they've done is they've effectively dumbed down everybody by removing real knowledge and holding on to it and keeping it only for a select few, so that they're not able to be able to say that anyone else can have it. So you're dealing with a systematic approach to dumbing down humanity and taking away knowledge that has been given to humanity, or knowledge that humanity has worked for as a collective, and keeping it from the masses and keeping it for a select few to be able to control the masses and be able to control a lot of people. So that's how they were able to do it, is that they made sure no one else could get it. It's like when you're dealing with a child that's like, mine, and they're like, I want the ball, and then they keep the ball for themselves and they want to make sure nobody else gets the ball. That's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people that have real knowledge in their hands because they took it from us, they took it from our temples, they took it from our mystery schools, and that's why they can sit up here and say that they're secret societies and secret temples and all this kind of stuff and blah, 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 and they claim to be standing on this stuff, but then they have doofuses like Billy Carson coming out here and distracting you from real knowledge and real things and acting like they have it, and then they have you guys all looking at fucking Atlantis and fucking off-planet bullshit, star seeds and the fucking the Pleiadians, the Pleiadians, all this kind of fucking bullshit, and then you got Gaia TV, and then you got all these all these people coming forth with these fucking disclosures talking about the government has fucking alien technology, and then they're out here like, yeah, it's like that movie Battlefield, bro. Like, yeah, it's like that shit with Transformers. And then they got everybody by the fucking balls, and then everybody's out here thinking that shit's real.
Well, they're just distracting us from the spiritual technology that they actually have.
Exactly. And that's what we're saying, is if you want real spiritual technology, if you want real spiritual empowerment, then you need to find your ancestors, and your ancestors will put your spiritual power back in your hands. Because, like I said, thou shalt not cast, or the way that they put it, I don't know how the fuck they put it in the Bible, but they say you will not cast pearls before swine. Your ancestors are not going to give you real spiritual power if they can't trust you. It's that simple. On to the next question. Okay. Yeah, let's move into rapid fire, because we'll do this all night.
Give us some good topics.
How's everybody doing? Can you watch me on camera?
That's our technically like our go-to camera guy.
So, first up on the list, China bans seafood from Japan after Tokyo begins releasing treated radioactive water. Let's give you some context. So, China's Customs Department announced that it would stop importing all aquatic products originated from Japan, meaning the ban could potentially limit the other oceanic products besides seafood, such as sea salt and seaweed.
Radioactive water? They're releasing radioactive water?
No, they're releasing fish from radioactive water.
But it sounds like they're releasing something in the water first.
Tokyo has made a decision to begin releasing treated radioactive wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant, which dramatically is escalating an already tense feud between the two neighbors.
Right, so they're releasing radioactive wastewater into the sea, essentially, and then it's affecting the plant life and the animals and...
So Japan is just sending you a FU to China.
Pretty much.
But they're also effing themselves in the process. It's like...
Yeah, I mean, because...
But you know how Japan and China have
it's a long
they have a very long history,
battle,
historical battle. So I mean, but since when has China been the moral authority on what is considered good in terms of food?
They're horribly. They're not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you an example. So China, I really have a personal bone to pick with this one.
With China?
With China.
All right, we're gonna turn off our mics.
There's in Jamaica we have a lot of fish and like a large marine life population or whatever you can call it. So people actually there's a lot of fishermen. That's how a lot of people make their living. But recently, since I've been back, they've been telling me that the Chinese have actually released this new kind of fish into a lot of the rivers and a lot of the waters. And the reason for that is because this fish, they reproduce very fast and they're cheap to sell. So they're kind of like using Jamaica because it's like full of waters. So they're using it to kind of produce this fish. But the problem is that the fact that that fish is actually dangerous for the Jamaican waters because they're killing all of the indigenous natural fishes. So now it's putting a big strain on the fishermen and their way of living and their lifestyle. So, I mean, they cannot be the moral authority on anything. I mean, because look what they do. Even these little bugs that you see flying around here now, these little red bugs with the little dots, I think those are like Asian bugs that came from China. And there's theories that they released them into the U.S. because those bugs actually, when they lay their eggs, they go into these trees and fruit trees, and then they actually eat out the nutrients from the tree. So it's actually killing the tree population or the plant population here in North America. So that's kind of like another biological warfare thing they got going on.
All I have to say is that humans are very short-sighted, because how do you know, like, Chinese, the Chinese powers that be, they're trying to make a quick buck or do some sort of like warfare, right, on other countries. How do they know that their descendants one day are not going to marry a Jamaican or marry an American, and then their descendants are going to be living in America, eating from these waters, eating from this land, and then, you just screw your entire next generation because blood travels fast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just short-sighted.
It's about the money, baby.
Yeah.
Let us know when we're over time.
Yeah.
Because there's actually, when we finished with rapid fire, there was a couple questions that people rephrased a few times, and there was a question that came from IG that I do want to get to. So, but
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that question.
yeah.
Got it.
Ridiculous.
Got it. Okay.
Don't judge people's questions, okay?
Okay.
Let people
next
ask their
up,
questions.
We have the future of stem cell
So
storage.
they're having a hard time hearing you, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Turn my mic up. Can you hear me now?
I got no snare.
I know y'all can hear me now. That's pretty loud. Okay. So the future of stem cell storage. 24-year-old Catherine Cross has put out a toolkit for new parents. So
turning
this
my
one
mic
was
off, please.
really interesting. Let me find the tab that I had. So basically, this lady has reached out to the founder of Coinbase and one other organization, and basically gotten funding to store cells from new parents' umbilical cords from new babies. And basically what they're saying is that if you can maintain these stem cells, they'll be frozen. It's like a bank of people's stem cells from the umbilical cords, that if there's a sickness that shows up later on in life, you can always use those stem cells to treat whatever disease comes up. So that's pretty much the premise of it.
That's interesting to me because I find that the modern system is oftentimes, as much as they think they're intelligent, they're oftentimes behind. Because traditionally we use the umbilical cord as medicine in case the baby's ever sick. I even still have my umbilical cord. Like I could go to Jamaica right now and open my drawer and get it, and like
Right.
I've even drank in it, which is
But they don't harvest the cells from it, right? It's just you keep it in water, and
Yeah.
then the liquid can heal the baby if
Yeah.
there's any illness, right?
yeah, but it's just showing the fact that, like Tutibsaa is saying, they go too far.
Yeah,
Like they want to
yeah.
have this weird proof that this thing exists, so they do all this weird stuff. Like, why would you even want to have a bank of other people's stem cells? That's ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
Next.
So next. Thank you, Tuti.
Just cause.
Sidebar: we can't ever let Zawaz make these templates again
Why? What
because
happened?
they're just. all over the place. I don't know what this one is about. It says, today at the notoriously violent jail in Fulton County, Georgia, I was arrested despite having committed no crime. I don't know what this is. No context at all.
Just by having committed
No context at all.
So it was the laws. It was the laws.
I'm like, what happened to you, bro? So this is Trump.
Yeah, that was from Trump. But that was supposed to be. That's not supposed to be the one we're supposed to do next.
Okay.
But
Okay, so let's move on then.
luckily, I know what that is because when I saw that, I clicked on it, and then I'm like, oh, that was Trump.
That was from Trump.
Okay, so it's speculated a new BRICS currency system could be unveiled as countries strive to lessen their dependence on the U.S. dollar for trade. I think everybody remembers this one. We've been talking about this one for a while. But after some months of speculation, the BRICS summit is underway in South Africa. All eyes are on the bloc, which is seen as a force for the global South and aims to lessen Western dominance over world institutions.
Bricks upon bricks upon bricks.
So, shout out to BRICS, right? Because in order for people to understand that you can't continue to function in the way that you think you can continue to function, you have to know, like, there's that phenomenal story that Dave Chappelle tells in one of his stand-ups, and he says that he was a very sensitive child, and he was a child that cried a lot. And because he was a very sensitive child and a child that cried a lot, his mom pulled him to the side and said, son, sometimes you have to be the lion that you are so that you can be the sheep that you actually are. Or you have to be a lion so that you can be the sheep that you actually are. And this is the thing. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then what's the A? South Africa. South Africa. Shout out to y'all. Because now there's other countries joining the fold in terms of BRICS that are standing up to America and the so-called Western superpowers, the G7 countries, and then the U.S. trying to dominate the World Bank by making the U.S. dollar become the currency that sets the standard for the rest of the world. And they're saying, like, enough is enough because we have all the resources, we have everything that you guys depend on, we have everything that you guys need, and we're not going to give it to you guys anymore. And now we're going to stand up and we're going to monetize our own resources, our own natural resources, our own things that we're standing on. And now y'all can't have it anymore. It's done. It's over. That's why everything that is happening in Niger is something that you guys need to pay attention to, because what's happening in Niger is there's an African country that the U.S. and that France and that the other superpowers depend upon in order to get so many natural resources. There's even a gas line pump that they were building through the country of Niger that was going to pump gas all the way to Europe, that they were like, nah, enough is enough. And then they overthrew the president. There was a military coup d'etat, and then they said enough is enough. And then now you have these lapdogs for these so-called colonial powers that look like us. They have dark skin. They claim to be African, like the Nigerian president, nothing but a fake so-called African leader that's out here and then selling us out. ECOWAS is another lapdog for these colonial powers. And what they're saying and what they're trying to do is they're saying, like, nah. They're saying that you can't do this and you've overthrown the democratic process and we have to restore the democratic order and all this kind of nonsense. And then what's really happening is that these bullies, these so-called superpowers from the G7 countries are saying, like, no, we have to maintain our supremacy. We have to maintain our position as being so-called superior to these so-called third world countries where we rape and pillage and take all their natural resources, and then we come and then we say that we have the power, we have the say, and then we make sure that nobody goes there and nobody stands up there, and then we maintain all the power and all the control globally, and those countries are saying enough is enough. So hey, sometimes you have to align yourself with the lesser of two evils. And if Russia is really standing on some principles, if China is really standing on some principles, if India is really standing on some principles, because we all know the Kemetic culture used to be in those areas. So if they're still standing on those traditions, then as far as I'm concerned, hey, by all means,
Bricks
welcome
spawn
to
bricks.
the great game, America.
Shout out to Burkina Faso.
Exactly.
Because they said if you
shout
attack
out to the
Nigeria,
president. Exactly.
if you attack Niger, it's on, bro.
It's on.
It's on.
Shout out to that president in
on.
Burkina Faso, Ibrahim. I don't know his name. I
don't want to butcher it.
I don't want to butcher it, but shout out to that president because he's really standing and he's really pushing for Africa to stand up. And like I said, that's another example of that youthful energy standing up when sometimes there's a lot of people that are just in the way.
It's like, again, it's not that we want to disrespect our elders, but we gotta just be honest. Sometimes, especially in terms of like Africa and the leaders, they've just been doing nothing but holding us back. They're the ones that are just there taking all of the handouts from Europe, selling out the people and not giving any of the
No
resources.
principles.
Even here.
Yep. So, you know.
It is what it is.
Speaking of Burkina, we now know that the Burkina supply that they just sent to Niger has finally
Nice.
touched down. They've sent a convoy packed with essential goods to Nigerians who lack basic supplies following ECOWAS sanctions. The UN warns the country's food security crisis is worsening as a result of punitive measures taken against Niamey following last month's coup.
Yeah, this is the problem, is these so-called superpowers have gotten very comfortable with using sanctions and cutting off your ability to stand up on your own and use your own natural resources and trade economically with other countries, import, export, all of these different things, by basically saying, you're not allowed to do business with that country. You're not allowed to invest in that country. You're not allowed to do this and that with that country. And that's all sanctions are. Sanctions are a bullying tactic in order to cut off somebody's means in order to support themselves and stand on their own 2 feet. So it's about time that other countries are standing up and saying, like, you know what? Fuck you, America. Fuck you, France. Fuck you, Britain. Fuck you, Italy. Fuck you, all these other countries that claim to be these so-called superpowers. And fuck your sanctions. Because we can do our stuff with or without you. Because we don't need you. You need us. And it's about damn time. So shout out to, again, the president of Burkina Faso, shout out to the countries in Africa, and shout out to Brazil, shout out to BRICS, shout out to all of those countries that are finally standing up and being like, fuck you, you colonial powers, we don't need you, and we're standing up on our own.
Shout out to PLO Lumumba. I've been watching that guy for some time
I like
now.
that guy. I like
and
that guy.
I really want to shout him out because he brings up a lot of good, valid points. And I'm going to shout him out really because he's pushing for a united Africa. So there's no reason why.
Gaddafi?
It's like Gaddafi.
Like Gaddafi, yeah.
Exactly.
Where's Hillary?
Like, there's no reason why someone from the outside should be able to put any of those sanctions and tariffs on any country in Africa, because Africa's
fear.
too huge, it's too large,
Yeah.
it's too great, and it's too wealthy
Exactly.
to not be trading with each other. To
Bruh.
not have
Right. If
one
you have all-
unified
if you have all the
governmental
resources in
power.
one
It
place,
doesn't make
then,
any
yeah.
sense. But that's, again, the Berlin Conference, colonialism. That's the result that we have.
Right.
But it seems like
And
that's
it's
coming to
simply
an end.
power. It's simply power games. When one place is made to feel beholden to another place, like they don't have the power, they don't have the resources, they can't do it without this other power, then this is it's psychological games at the end of the day.
Exactly. Like America, none of these countries in Europe, none of these countries in America would exist or would be able to have all of this so-called lavish life that we have if countries like in Africa and countries in South America and countries in Southeast Asia were not in the position that they're in today. And that's a fact.
Next. Nah, I told y'all. This is why I took over rapid fire. I'm like, from now on, we're going to do rapid fire a different kind of way.
So, on the other side, right? So that's talking about what's going on in Africa. So talking about what's going on here in the States with black people, right? This topic is basically saying that black English is the degenerate culture that black people have adopted.
Sewell?
Huh?
Thomas Sewell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. And he was basically saying how even this thing that black people try to cling on to with Ebonics is really just it's a shoot off of people speaking in a specific way that came from European countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And I know there'll be a lot of debate on that because for a lot of people they think Ebonics is actually kind of like a dialect of African vernacular. But the truth and the reality is, if you listen to any of Thomas Sewell's or Sowell's, I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Seals.
Yeah, but if you listen to what he's really saying and then you research it for yourself, then you understand that, yeah, it's real. It's just that in Europe, there was a large majority of poor white people who were shipped to the South because they were not wanted in Europe. So who best to be around the black people that we don't really want around us other than the poor white people? So you have a mixing of the white people, the poor white people, who we can now call today white trash, with the black people who were enslaved. And now you have a mixing, and those people kind of like trade, they trade things culturally. They learn things from each other. But for the majority of it, black people raised in the States didn't have access to the African culture in the same way as maybe their great-great-grandparents did. So they ended up learning more from the white people there. So a lot of the speech actually still comes from Europe. But it's also couldn't be debatable as well, because if you know about down south, the Gullah Geechee culture,
Like the Gullah.
the Gullah Geechee culture,
Gullah Island.
I personally, when I hear them speak, I can understand them because their speech patterns are in alignment with the patois and the Creole we speak in the Caribbean. And that's simply because my ancestors were transported over there, and some of their ancestors came to the Caribbean. So there's a lot of African words and African vernacular in their speech, and a lot of slang comes from the Gullah Geechee. But again, it's a mixture of that European or English vernacular that gave birth to how you would see people speaking in the inner cities of North America today.
Yep. Next.
So next up, we have something that's going on in one of the videos showed up from Philadelphia. They're calling this like zombie land in Philadelphia. They're asking, the question is like, what's really happening all over the United States? There's this video where there's people on this drug. I think it's called Trank or something like that. And people are just asleep in the streets in masses, like
They look like mannequins.
normal crackheads.
Like,
They moving around.
The way they're kind of like, I saw that. The way that they're kind of like suspended in air. Like they look like they're almost some of them look like they're riding skateboards, but the skateboard's not there, and then they're kind of just like stuck, like as if they were riding the skateboard. And I mean the scary part. I mean not to make light of the situations that those people find themselves in. The scary part is that like, who's making that drug?
Yeah.
Like. So the real question becomes like, who's benefiting from that? Because you have to understand that like the modern medical system is just a business, and then they're just in bed, and that's why nobody really trusts doctors, because doctors in the modern medical system are just in bed with big pharma. And it's like, so if this is a drug, it's like fentanyl, right?
It's like mixed with fentanyl.
Yeah, it's like mixed with
it literally
fentanyl.
is, yeah.
Like, where did fentanyl come from? That's a government approved drug. So it means like big pharma's had it. And it's like, that means big pharma is the one that's out here killing people legally.
Yeah.
So the thing is, this is like, eventually everybody has to get hip to the game and understand the business of America, because it's actually really scary the way that they have all those people on the sidewalks in Philly.
It's really
And
sad.
then it just makes you kind of think like, so are they just testing it out in Philly? And then now they're going to bring it to a much larger audience, like on some They Clone Tyrone shit. Because if you haven't seen They Clone Tyrone, go see They Clone Tyrone. And that trank drug looks like something that they're going to be rolling out to the masses very soon.
It's already here. It's in the
scary.
chicken. They told you it's in the chicken.
It's so scary. It, like, I saw that video, I read the article, and they're even saying like one whiff of it, or even you're like near the drug, or it could like gets access to your system somehow, and you're like addicted instantly. Like,
It's
that's
insane.
how strong it is.
Yeah, I mean, I
Shout
saw
out to
it.
Big Pharma.
I saw it personally like 2 years ago. So it's been around
Oh,
for
it's
a
been
while.
around.
It's been around for a while.
Damn.
And I was driving through downtown Philly and I saw the crackhead. I thought he was a crackhead at first, but I didn't know about the name of the drug. So he was just there leaning and then leaning and then leaning and leaning, and he just wouldn't fall.
Was he in the
an
street or was he on
endless
the
lean.
sidewalk?
It is
No, he
crazy.
was on the sidewalk. He was an endless lean, but he would not fall.
I mean, the sad part
Wow.
is that's somebody's child.
Yeah.
Like, that's somebody's brother, that's somebody's sister, that's somebody's mom, that's somebody's dad. Like, that's somebody from somebody's
That's a
family.
human. That's a
That's
human.
a human being.
But that spirit, I mean, that's done. It's like the spirit's like not.
I mean, the
connected to
spirit is
body,
probably
yeah.
detached from the body at that point. Spirit is interchangeable with soul for those that don't know what the hell we're talking about. It's like the soul has left the body because it's like the physical manifestation of the soul or the spirit, which would be the body, is just not making it favorable for the soul or the spirit to remain around or to stay around. So I mean, it's sad. It's really sad. And hopefully we get to a point where we can destroy Big Pharma. Maybe when Africa gets a nuclear weapon, we can just drop a bomb on
Just
all Big
target
Pharma.
Big Pharma.
Yeah, all Big Pharma factories. Shout out to Africa. Get that nuke, baby. Get that nuke.
Oppenheimer. Okay, so
Technology.
Until they build a big bomb.
coming to the end of rapid fire, we got two more topics kind of tied together. Putin, the BRICS is, the de-dollarization is in progress.
Yes.
So the de-dollarization train has left the station and is going full steam ahead. That was Vladimir Putin's message via video link to the BRICS Business Forum taking place in Joburg, South Africa. The Russian president, who's wanted by The Hague, is attending virtually.
International Criminal Court, something like that.
Yeah, he
Right.
wasn't even let
Is
in
attending
to South
virtually.
Africa.
Is attending virtually after Western pressure to have him arrested put the host nation in an awkward spot.
I think I saw a video about this before, like, the date was occurring, and I don't remember the guy or even know the guy that they were interviewing, but they were asking him about letting Putin into the country and saying Putin is a war criminal and this
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that. And the guy responded with, "Okay, how much people did you guys kill in Libya? How much people did you guys kill in Iraq?"
Right. These international courts are somewhat
Fuck out of here.
Yeah, somewhat questionable. Given
Right.
like,
Why
are
isn't-
they going
why
to
hasn't-
target
Why haven't they
one
issued
person versus
a?
another person?
Why haven't they issued a criminal court warrant for Hillary Clinton's arrest? Because Hillary, that's a gang. That's
a good question.
That's Madame Gangsta. Like, why haven't they issued that criminal court
Or even Obama.
warrant for Obama? Yeah, every American president, you could damn near say that they could have
Sounds
a
like
criminal
someone's in
warrant.
someone's pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
sounds
It's
like-
just an extension of their powers. That's what I'm saying. Is like they're just trying to get Putin, but Putin's intelligent, man. Shout out to Putin. Keep doing what you're doing, bro. We're with you. Next,
Tifa's with you.
nah, you're with them too. You're all with them. If I'm with them, y'all are with them.
Man, never would have thought it would be you, Tiasta.
Yeah, Tias was like, actually, I have so many things that are actually still riding on me. I don't necessarily approve with riding for Putin. No, thank you.
All right, last up, we have South Africa saying we will not be bullied.
Thank you.
President Cyril, I don't want to butcher his last name, is in his latest speech ahead of the BRICS summit. With South Africa coming under pressure to take sides on global issues, President Cyril, in his latest speech ahead of the BRICS summit, vowed that his country would never be forced to side with any global powers. The leaders of BRICS nations will gather in Johannesburg for their annual BRICS summit. Putin's going to be there and all that kind of stuff in the run-up to the summit. Okay, yeah, that's not relevant. But yeah, the real message was that he's like, I don't care who y'all want me to side with. You're not going to bully me into it.
So South Africa is basically saying from now on, like, we don't give a fuck, and we're going to side with who we want to side with, and you're not going to force us to side with anybody based on your sanctions.
Exactly.
Based on whatever you claim to have, whatever you're going to do to us, fuck you. We're going to do what we want to do.
That's appropriate.
Shout out to South Africa.
That's very
sounds
appropriate.
Like, it sounds like the era of not giving into bullying, basically.
I mean, finally, these countries are saying, like, fuck you. And they're standing up to America, and they're standing up to these colonial powers. And it needs to happen. It needs to be said. It needs to be done. These so-called leaders need to actually be leaders. You're not a leader if you're a pussy. And that's the thing, is like, the last topic, which was really supposed to be about Trump, the one thing you could say about Trump, Trump's not a pussy, bro. So I don't vote, but if I was going to vote, I'd vote for Trump. You know why? Because Trump's not a pussy. And he's going to stand up, and he's going to make certain shit happen.
Well,
And
I would say this. I don't think any of the leaders that America has had are pussies. I think they were just manipulative
they're
snakes.
pussies.
No. Look, hear me out.
It
Hear me
depends-
out.
it depends
Hear
on
me
what your
out.
definition
They
of a
all
pussy
drop
is.
bombs. You can't be a pussy and drop bombs. They all drop bombs.
Yeah, I mean, they
Trump
do
is
what's good
just
for America.
upfront
What's your
and
definition
blunt.
of pussy?
Yeah.
Trump is just, you take what you get. That's
But
it.
Trump doesn't give a shit about furthering America's agenda and America's colonial imperialism. Trump gives a fuck about doing what makes sense for Trump and his boys. And that's why you got to respect it. Like, you got to respect somebody that's just going to be honest about, like, nah, like, fuck that. Like, you got to respect that. And Trump is about that.
I mean, yeah, the one thing you can respect about Trump is he's like knows the system really well, and he's still anti-system. He's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
against what
Yeah,
all
yeah,
they're
I don't
doing.
pay taxes.
But he's still
Yeah.
out for
Why would
himself.
I?
Yeah, he's
still-
like, neither should you.
Neither
He's still
should
out
you.
for himself.
You don't
yeah,
know
and
how
the
not
old boys
to.
club.
Yeah, exactly. He's like,
better get on
sucker.
But
That's your fault.
Trump is not the
With
be
your
all.
broke ass.
Trump is not the be all and end all. He's just manipulating large groups of people also to follow him based on what they want to hear. So
So,
Listen, again, it's the lesser of two evils.
That I'll give you. I'll give
End of
you
the
that.
day,
I'll give you
sometimes
that.
you just have to make that
I'll
choice.
give
It
you
is
that.
what it is. But going back to South Africa, shout out to South Africa. I didn't even think that your president had it in you. Big ups to you. And,
yeah, I mean, South Africa's
Shout
not
out to your
exactly the
daughters.
bastion of traditionalism. So, shout out to South Africa, because South Africa was considered one of the most westernized areas of Africa.
It is. I think it's the most highly colonized place in Africa.
I mean,
Like,
aside from
it's
the-
ridiculous.
Aside from North Africa.
Oh well, yeah, of course, obviously.
Yeah,
But
like, no one really even
when we're
considers,
talking
yeah,
about like
yeah.
under North Africa, like South Africa is probably the most highly
It's like it's
colonized.
probably north because I mean the Algerians, those aren't Africans. The Moroccans, those aren't Africans.
Right.
Like the
You said
They're
Tunisians,
in
not-
Africa.
like yeah,
They're
it's in
African.
Africa, but those aren't really Africans.
Those are Arabs.
Those are Arabs.
That's true.
Like just keep it real. And then with that being said, there's a few questions we wanted to get to before people felt left out. The question from Instagram Live was from Sankofa Uchichi. I don't know. What can be said of the notion that there's evidence that the human being is physiologically designed for a mostly fruit diet? How does that measure when compared to the Kemetic diet?
Who gave the evidence?
Yeah, I don't know who gave that evidence. If you're following Dr. Sebi's methodology, then
Fruitology.
it's
But
not-
even Sebi didn't even say that.
yeah, but Sebi would say that it's good to eat a lot of fruits that are alkaline.
Fruitarians.
As long as you eat a lot of stuff that's alkaline, then it's okay because it's about eating the alkaline stuff.
Yeah, but that
But he would say like
mean-
it's better to eat the fruits that are alkaline than to eat things that are unalkaline.
Yeah, but listen, you have to understand we as a human species come from a lot of different lands and a lot of different areas with a lot of different food systems. So look back on what your ancestors ate. So because what Kagzrimen's ancestors ate is going to be different from what my ancestors ate, are going to be different from what Tutibsaa's ancestors ate. So our constitution is all going to be different also in terms of what our digestion and our makeup is used to. Like for the Irish, potatoes, vegetables, meat and potatoes, right?
Shout out to the Irish.
Very different from Tutibsaa's people, which would
Yeah.
be completely different. So the thing is also, you got to look at what your ancestors ate, and then also just as a human species, we can't just live off just fruit.
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean-
because really think about this, and this is the problem with like these vegan, fruitarian arguments. It's like, do you really think that if you were living in accordance with nature, you would be eating nothing but fruits? Because let's be for real, certain fruits don't grow in certain times of the year.
And certain areas.
In certain areas, right? So now we're talking about geographical locations. Certain animals don't even appear in certain areas in certain times of the year. Certain vegetables don't even grow in certain areas in certain times of the year. Yes, you can farm, but you farm within the season. So that means people for thousands of years, their food or what they've ate was dictated by the environment. The only reason why you have diets such as fruitarian, vegetarianism, or veganism is because you have the privilege to have access to any kind of food, anytime, anywhere, at any space. That's what it is. It's a privilege. You can only have the concept of even fresh food if you're living in a place where you don't actually see food grown. The idea of fresh food doesn't even make sense. So that whole concept of human beings are anatomically fit for only fruit, that's nonsense. It's just not true.
No, I mean,
It's just not true.
we
You
need
eat-
complex carbohydrates in the form of grains, cereals,
Exactly.
vegetables.
Complex
Exactly.
carbohydrates.
Exactly. Where my
Meat.
ancestors is from,
We require
cassava.
proteins from meat.
Thank you. Where I'm from, cassava, yams,
Yeah.
fish,
Yeah.
meat, and veggies and
Yeah,
greens.
yeah.
Is that simple?
Fruit is like a, it's like a treat.
An occasional.
It's an
Yeah.
occasional thing.
food, yeah.
So
But hey, whatever.
yeah, that's kind of like an insight into the actual Kemetic food pyramid, which I know that
Come
will be
to
coming out.
initiation.
Yeah, you
Get the
learn
food pyramid.
about that in initiation about the real Kemetic food pyramid. So if you really want to learn that, then you gotta you want the cashew, you gotta climb the cashew tree. So come get it. There's a question I really wanted to answer, and this is it, and then we're gonna end. It was phrased differently twice, and it was asked by two different people. And the question is, first it was from Kim Warrior. Are there any modern culture in Africa that preserved some Kemetic culture beside your organization?
Modern.
And then the question became from Joshua Rawls. What is there to be said about the various Kemetic human origins coming from traditional priests from different parts of Merita? Are they wrong? Do they hold a different piece of the story? That's a good question. That's a really good question. And it kind of touches on the same thing. And we have a story in the initiation about Ramses II, which is considered one of the last great pharaohs.
Well, the last great pharaoh.
The real last official pharaoh.
Everybody else after that is
Yeah,
bullshit.
everyone after that is bullshit. I was trying to clean it up, but okay. And we say that he called all of his children in front of him, and he asked them, and he said, "Which one of you resembles me the most?" And they all raised their hand and said, "Me." And he said, "Good." And he said, "Now go out, start your civilizations, start your communities, start your places, start your families, go out to different areas and go do this and go do that." And he said, "But remember that all of you came from me." And then he said, "Now go." And they all leave. And then one of his advisors asked him, and they say, "Well, why'd you do that? Why wouldn't you say who resembles you the most?" And he said, "Because they weren't fighting." And this the thing, is historically speaking, the civilization known as the Kemetic civilization, or Kemet, it spawned the whole content of what is now known as Africa, or the whole continent of Merita, the whole continent of Australia, the majority of Asia. That's why you even have the name Asia, because it really means Aisha, meaning of Aisha. And then you have the majority of the continent of Europe, and then you also have a vast majority of the continent that is known as the Americas. Now, with that being said, it means that yes, the Earth Center is not saying that we are the only ones that have preserved Kemetic culture. What we are saying is we are the only ones that have been given the approval to come out with the Kemetic culture because of the systems, because of the long, rich history that we come from. We're telling you that it's coming from a non-colonized place. It's coming from a place in which it has been hidden and it has not been tarnished by the colonizer and their history books and their attempts to rewrite history, their attempts to snuff out the intelligence that comes from our ancestors, the intelligence that comes from the Kemetic culture, the intelligence that comes from the mission of Kepta. And if you're dealing with an organization that claims to be coming from the Kemetic civilization, then we beg you to ask them, then where are you getting what you claim to be standing on? That's why we can say the people that say
Ankh in my eye.
are full of shit, because
Ankh in my eye.
is not even the correct way to say it. So with that being said, yes, that's why. But we're not the only ones that have preserved it. But the difference is this, is that you're going to go to those different places, you're going to go to those different areas, and they might have it still, and they might be preserving it, but they're never going to reveal to you that they actually have it. And that's what made Master Naba and what he did to be highly radical and highly, dare I say, dangerous from a lot of people from the traditional societies, because it was going to introduce a so-called, danger into the hidden societies and the hidden culture of Merita, because there's a big difference between Africa and Merita, and we need to distinguish the two. And the difference is this, is Africa is the colonized version of the continent. It's the Western version of the continent. Merita is the real uncolonized, hidden Kemetic part of Africa. And they're not going to reveal to you that they have that unless you prove to them that you are also coming from the culture. But what made Master Naba so special is he opened up the doors for people to be able to have access back into the culture, to be able to gain it if you had lost it through imperialism or through colonization, to be able to get it back. That's been another episode of the Gated Gates podcast. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. We hope you guys continue to tune in. There's a lot of different things that are coming up, different temples. The doors of initiation are opening all throughout the month of September. September 3rd, we're opening up the doors in the Temple of New Jersey, 1 p.m. Come check us out. Come register. That's going to be the class registration. We're going to go over all of the details about what the initiation entails, the cost, how long it will go, the classes, all that kind of stuff. You guys will set the class schedule, all of those to the seekers that are going to show up. Answer the call of your ancestors. No matter where you are, we got locations in Canada. We got 2 in Canada. We got Toronto. We got Montreal. We have a location in Chicago. We got a location in Houston. We got a location in the DMV area, Baltimore. We have a location. We have 2 in the UK. We got Coventry. We got London. We have temples in Merita. No matter where you are, we got a temple online. They're going to be opening in September 2. No matter where you guys are, you guys can get access to the knowledge. It's time. It's time to wake up. It's time to tell the colonizer to go fuck themselves. But it's time to do that by reclaiming your ancestral practices. And if you're ready, then the call of your ancestors is there. If you're not, go back to church.
Shout out to one event we have coming up this Thursday, August 31st, Maha Rose, Brooklyn, 200 Columbia Street, 6 to 8 p.m. Come join us for the Secrets to Indigenous Spiritual Cleansing. We're really excited.
See you next week. Please continue to tune in.